Welcome back to Feed the Post, and we are back. It's been a few weeks since I've done one of these podcasts. Just kind of wanted to figure out exactly where I wanted to go with all of this stuff, and I think going live is something that I plan on doing semi-regularly, if not like once a week. As of right now, I think the plan is probably Sunday nights, although I do know I'm starting back up with these with Christmas next week, New Year's the following week, so probably a little bit wonky schedule for the next couple weeks. But then get into a rhythm more of Sunday night or Monday night going live, just recapping the Big Ten week, previewing the upcoming week, hit on a few teams. 30, 45 minutes, hopefully. I know, over on my coverage on Boilers in the Stands, we say that a lot of times and then it just goes way over. But 30, 45 minutes, hopefully we do that. And yeah, we'll just jump right into it. First, we're going to start off with just recapping this week. Obviously, with finals and all that stuff, winter break, not as many games going on within the Big Ten. No games at all played Monday. Tuesday, the only one of note that I'm going to talk about, Maryland won 105-65 against Alcorn State. Only thing that's worth really mentioning, and the only reason I'm even going to bring this up, is that Maryland knocked down 14 threes on 30 attempts, 46.7%. Obviously, they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. Yes, it is against a bad team, but when it comes to just pure shot making like that, it's a good thing to at least see the shots go in for them. I still have a little bit of hope that they can be, obviously they're not going to be this upper tier Big Ten team that I thought they would be coming into the season, but I think I still have a little bit of hope that they can at least become a middling and like bubble type team. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of wins in the Big Ten, and who knows if they actually get there. Wednesday, some of the key games on the men's side is Chicago State beats Northwestern 75-73. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a bit, so I will hold off on that. On the women's side, Princeton beats Rutgers 66-55. It's just another game that Rutgers has kind of struggled to score the ball. I really don't think Rutgers is that far away from being a good team. Like, I really don't. I think they're right there. I've liked what Michael has done a lot this year. She's kind of the one that's been able to do a bit of everything. They have some shooters, they have some guard play. I just don't think they're that far away. I think they have a lot of pieces. Just got to kind of put it all together for 40 minutes, knock down some more shots consistently, and then they're kind of right in there. Thursday, Friday, no real games of note. Saturday, there's a pretty big Big Ten slate for the Big Ten in general. Purdue knocks off Arizona 92-84. I have a video on my YouTube, should be linked in the comments below, or in the description below, of just kind of breaking down how Purdue was able to overcome Arizona, what they did well, including obviously Fletcher Lawyer goes for 27, Braden Smith goes for 26, Edey for 22. They combined for 75 of the 92 points for Purdue against Arizona in a game that was a really, really fun. I was fortunate to be at that game, doing covers for Boilers in the Stands, and just a great atmosphere for I know it's a semi-home game for Purdue, but it is a neutral game at its core, right? It's not at Mackey, a neutral game, just a packed house, and it was loud in there. It really was, and I was just impressed in general. Not some other big games from the Big Ten on the weekend. The one that hurts the Big Ten the most, Kansas beats Indiana 75-71. This would have been a big spot for IU just to have a quality win, as we're going to talk about later in the show. It's just like a lot of these teams are going to have to go just play really, really well in Big Ten play to have a chance at making the tourney. Right now, there's 4 teams that are pretty comfortably in, I would say, and then there's a few that have a good to decent chance. But Kansas wins 75-71. Indiana looked good for 3/4 of the game, and really just it came back to me for the half-court offense. When they got out and ran, things were good. And when Galloway, he had a career high 28, I believe, and he did some really good stuff on offense in the half court of just being able to get downhill. IU went to this, I call it a snug handoff or snug Chicago. And what I mean by snug is like this handoff is happening like pretty much all within the paints. Like it was Khalil Ware and Galloway kind of empty side, and Ware was handing it off about 8 feet from the rim, and Galloway's either just kind of tight curl or he's floating to 10 feet or whatever. And so I call that snug. But IU went to that a bunch in that second half, and they got good looks from that. But just at the end of the day, I think the lack of depth that they have, especially with Xavier Johnson out, just kind of came through. Gabe Cubs is a solid, I'd say he's a solid freshman point guard. He's definitely done his job. But at the same time, he's not a guy that's going to go out and get you a ton of points at this very moment. Can he be that guy one day? 100%. I think he's kind of just has that in him to be that type of guy. I mean, he put up 11 against Auburn in a blowout loss, but still put up 11. Mackenzie McBako looked really good, and he's starting to become really, really comfortable in the Indiana offense. And then you saw it a couple times. I think he had 2 pull-up threes, if I'm remembering correctly. I know one for sure. Just kind of coming off a screen, getting into his rhythm, top of the key, and as I mentioned before, the half-court offense just is kind of stagnant at times for IU, and that's where Mackenzie McBako can come in. If he's going to be playing the 3, he just kind of has to knock those types of shots. Double digits in 6 straight games for him there. And just I thought even on the defensive end, I thought there was more energy from him. Still not a great defender, but I think he's improving on that end. 5 rebounds to go along with it. Also had a couple drives to the rim, which is important. He has 2 of 5 from 2, but I believe both makes were at the rim, and one of them was an and one. So he's not just purely settling for jumpers right now. It's a lot. It's becoming a little bit more of a mix, and IU needs him to score the ball, just straight up. Malik Renew and Chloe are going to do their thing. Galloway obviously had a great game, but you can't rely on that from him every single game. And it's going to rest on his shoulders a lot, especially with just not a ton of depth on this IU roster. So next game, MSU beats Baylor 88-64. We'll talk about Michigan State in a bit, but a huge win for the Big Ten. That's why the Kansas one would have been so big for IU too. Now you have a couple more teams with a really good non-conference win, and right now we'll talk about all the top wins in the non-conference for the Big Ten, and there aren't many. There really aren't, especially when you take out Purdue, who's obviously got top seed locked up as of right now. Georgia Tech beats Penn State 82-81 in overtime. I know there was some controversial call kind of down the stretch. It's just Penn State. They're a little bit worse than I was expecting coming into the year. And honestly, it's the defense. I thought the defense was going to be better than what it was. These are a lot higher scoring games than what I'm expecting. I'm pulling up their KenPom right now. 98th in offense, 149th in defense. And honestly, like if you've looked at what Mike Rhodes has done at VCU, it's top 15 defenses, and then it's like 150 on offense. 150 on offense, and I thought that was going to carry over to Penn State this year too, and it just didn't. It hasn't so far. Ace Baldwin's been fine. Kanye Clary's been pretty good. He's been good, I think, attacking the rim and stuff, but just I thought the defense would be better. They have a bunch of wings. I thought they were going to switch more, have more effectiveness in the press, although they are forcing a ton of turnovers. So they'll probably be the bottom dweller in the conference, kind of because Minnesota's also pretty good. But it is what it is. Penn State's they're still going to be a tough out. Like they're not going to be a team you want to play in Big Ten play, I don't think, especially with how many turnovers they can force at a time. But Northwestern did bounce back from the Chicago State loss, beat DePaul 56-46. I've not gone back and watched that game yet. I do plan on doing that sometime this week. Not looking forward to it, just based on the score. We'll talk about it a little bit more. And then the last big game from Saturday, Ohio State beats UCLA 67-70 in a game that they combined to go 2 of 24 from 3. Not a pretty game by any means, but a game that Ohio State badly needed, especially with that Penn State loss kind of, just a week ago. As Ohio State's a team that is going to be comfortably in the tourney as of right now, they just can't let it slide. They could not let that Penn State, 18-point second half collapse into 2 losses in a row to UCLA, who's like UCLA. They're solid. They're going to be probably a borderline tourney team. I'm not like fully familiar looking through. Their best win right now is they have a 1-point win at home against UC Riverside, who's 250th in KenPom. That is their best win on the year. So like UCLA hasn't really proven themselves at all this year either. A much needed win for Ohio State. You get a little bit of the balanced scoring. Thornton, Battle, Gale, Akpara all scored double digits. If Akpara is scoring in double digits, I think that's a pretty big thing because what his value is just purely defense. He's the defensive guy, and Zegke's the offensive guy. And you've seen Ohio State get into a little bit of trouble, especially in that Penn State game too, of like, you just need Akpar out there for the defense, but now you're putting even more pressure on, a good perimeter duo in Thornton and Gale, and Battle can knock down shots. But if Akpar can take that leap, he's not going to be a post-up guy, but pick and roll, get some lobs, be in the dunker spot, some offensive rebounds and putbacks, that'll be big for Ohio State, just to kind of make their lineups more cohesive. I've liked what Evan Mahaffey has done. He didn't have a great game against UCLA, but I've enjoyed how they've used him as kind of this. They'll put him a lot in the high post or at the elbow 15-foot mark, and they basically just throw it into him and then let him kick out from there. So you've seen Battle get a bunch of threes off of that. He was only 1 for 5. Battle was only 1 for 5 from 3 this game. Like I said, Ohio State was 1 for 15 and UCLA was 1 for 10. Not a fun game in general, just low scoring. You had that the Evo ball. If anybody believes in that, although I know Craig Bowers believes it's cursed, or at least, the curse has been broken for Purdue. Last day, and that is today. Nebraska beats Kansas State 62-46. I have not watched this yet. I'm going to be transparent there, but Nebraska held Kansas State to 12 second half points, and that's where Nebraska has kind of struggled defensively, and they have their scheme, right? And the scheme is going to force a lot of threes. They're going to show a ton of help in the paint at the rim and just make guys shoot threes on them. And Kansas State went ice cold. They went 4 for 30 from 3. And so now when Nebraska Nebraska did not have a great offensive game, although they had 22 offensive rebounds, including 11 from Juwan Gary. That's the reason they won right there, is the offensive rebounding. But when they don't have a great offensive game, if other teams are not going to shoot the ball well, then they can keep themselves in any type of game. That's a huge win for them. I know Kansas State isn't great this year, but a true road win. And that's, now they've picked up wins against Michigan State, at Kansas State. Duquesne's an all right win. And then the rest of their schedule has been pretty easy for the most part. But that's, and then the other one on the women's side, Missouri beats Illinois 69-66. Illinois is struggling more than I expected this year, coming, with kind of all the talent they have. They're just not a deep team right now. They're playing pretty much 6, a little bit of 7 deep. They have to just rely on Cook and Bryant and Bostic a ton. And Bryant, Genesis Bryant went off this game. I'm blanking on her exact point total right now, but they have the guard play to beat anybody every night with Cook and Bryant, but it just hasn't quite formalized to what I expected right now. They're 5-3, 0-1 in the conference. Everybody on the women's side has played one Big Ten conference game. They'll resume that I believe right before New Year's is when the next set of games start, and then it's Big Ten play the rest of the way from there. So that's kind of the week recap. A good week on the men's side for the Big Ten. On the women's side, it was a lot of bye games in general. There wasn't too many marquee games to look at. Jeff Park says, 9-2 record for the conference this weekend should really help the metrics 100%. We're going to talk about that in a bit when we're just talking about the Big Ten in general. But this is the weekend that Big Ten badly needed wins, and they at least got some. And that's important going into Big Ten play when you have to play each other, and your good wins have to come against teams that also haven't had a ton of good non-conference wins. So with all that, we'll move on to Northwestern, and losing to Chicago State is not good, to say it in the lightest way possible. Their defense was just awful that game, and that's what it was. Like, Chicago State sort of got to do what they wanted on offense, and if Chicago State's doing what they want on offense, that's just a bad sign. Now, Northwestern also could have just easily won the game too, just by just pretty much out offensing them. But they did something pretty uncharacteristic for themselves, and they had 14 turnovers. Like, that's just not who they are. They're one of the best teams in the country at handling the ball. But we'll start on the defenses. I kind of got sidetracked there. Chicago State ran a bunch of Spain pick and roll. And so Spain pick and roll is where you have your normal pick and roll, but as that's happening, somebody is back screening the big. And basically, especially with Nicholson in, he was kind of put into these weird spots of playing drop, but also needing to help out onto the perimeter. And then Chicago State guards, they just got downhill a ton and kicked. Now, also credit Chicago State. They hit 8 threes, 8 for 23, 35%. And they're a team that is shooting 28% on the year. So if you're a Northwestern fan, you can probably look at that a bit too of hey, that's just a little bit of bad luck. But at the end of the day, they did it to themselves. They allowed Chicago State to get downhill, to get these good looks. And then they had 14 turnovers on top of it. And so now Chicago State can get out and run a little bit, and they don't have to get into this half-court offensive system. And now, when that happens, you knock down a couple threes, some turnovers, that's when these upsets happen. And we obviously saw Northwestern beat Purdue at home, so they'll have one of the best wins in the country with, beating Purdue. But at the same time, this might be the worst loss in the country. There's something else I'm missing, that where somebody lost to a worse team than Chicago State, as good of a talent as Northwestern is. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens comes tourney time. Now I know Iowa last year lost to what was it, Eastern Illinois, and they did still end up as an 8th seed, so it's definitely doable. But it's all going to come back to, hey, the Big Ten did not win well in non-conference play, and that's just going to hurt everybody in general. And so, they bounced back nicely against DePaul, 56-46. I assume that what they did for the days between the Chicago State and the DePaul game was they just practiced a bunch of defense. 46 points for DePaul. Even if DePaul isn't good, like that's obviously still an insane number. It was a very slow game, only 60 possessions. Both teams really just kind of wanted to slow it down. 4 of 22 from 3 for DePaul, 9 of 23 from 2. Just better defense in general. Just more disciplined, I thought, staying true to who they are, of keeping the ball in front of them, just forcing tough shots, and what they do. Like, they're another team similar to Nebraska that when the drives do happen, they're going to show a ton of help. They're going to double the post always. They're just going to have multiple guys in the paint at all times. And now DePaul goes 4 of 22 from 3, and hey, that's you don't really have to score then on offense if that happens. The other thing I want to talk about with Northwestern is they need both Barry and Langborg. Like Bowie and Barnheiser, they're going to do their thing. He didn't have a great game. He was only 1 for 7 from 3, 11 points, 4 assists against DePaul. But if you go back to the Chicago State game, Bowie has 23 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 turnovers. Barnheiser has 13 points, 6 rebounds. Langborg has 18 points on 5 of 6 from 3. And then it's just nobody really else. Barry was 3 points, 4 assists, 3 turnovers against Chicago State. And then against DePaul, no points, 5 rebounds, 0 of 5 from 3, 0 of 1 from 2. Northwestern just doesn't have the depth to be able to have guys have off nights like that. If you go back to the Purdue game, that was both Langborg and Barry were on. And now it makes it tough too, because then, and as talked about as someone like the post-game show and stuff, is you can't double the Bowie then. And so as Bowie was coming off, pick and rolls against Purdue was forced to switch, and it was always Fletcher Lawyer, and now Bowie goes at Lawyer, and now they're getting good shots. But that's because a lot of B in the last names for Northwestern, but Langborg and Barry are both knocking down threes. I think they were 4 for 5 from 3 and 3 for 5 from 3. And so now you can't afford to put 2 on the ball because they're going to knock down shots. In a game like Chicago State or DePaul, Barry's not really there offensively, and so now you can afford to kind of sag off. Now, Barry has shot well this year. He's 38%. Langborg's 43%, but it's been very streaky from Barry. Langborg's been a little bit more consistent, I think, after a little bit of a slower start. And then they're both guys that can shoot the leather off the ball. But this is just a team that doesn't have a ton of depth. I mean, against Chicago State, they really played 6 deep. They played a little bit of Luke Hunger. I'm curious why we didn't see Blake Preston at all, because he did play against DePaul. And so maybe there was an injury thing that I just missed. And if that's the case, then my bad on that front. But against Chicago State, Nicholson plays 20 points. Martinelli played 19 points, where they kind of just went to the super small ball of Barnheiser, Martinelli, and then their 3 guards. Hunger played 7 minutes. It's just, not a team that's really deep at all right now. And they need all the production they can get. With all that said, and they had one of the worst losses, I'm still not really sold on them because of how I just don't think the defense has been good all year. I don't think it was just a Chicago State game. It just hasn't quite hit the same. Obviously, you lose Audige, that's going to happen. But they also have Boo Buie, and so they can win any game that they're in because Boo Buie exists, and he's really, really good at what he does. Moving on to Michigan State, their only game of the week, they beat Baylor 88-64, and just what was a must-win game. They had to get this more than anything. 4 or 5, or they were 4 and 5 coming into the game. Now they're 5 and 5, and this was kind of what people, me especially, were hoping MSU would be as coming into the season, this top 5 team in the country. And I think watching this and just the season in general, but especially this game, everything has to go through the defense for them. That's just who they are this year. Losing Hauser was a big deal on the offensive front. They're not getting as good of looks as they probably wanted. But when they're locked in defensively like they were for this game and just kind of blitzed Baylor, now they can get out and run. Now Carr had a couple lobs. Aiken had a lob. Just get out in transition, get some buckets. And then Tyson Walker also hits some tough jumpers. So if you have Tyson Walker hitting tough jumpers, good defense, and then getting some transition points, MSU is going to be in a good spot. Like I said, much needed game for Michigan State. Can they put it together for multiple games in a row? I'm pulling up their schedule now. Oakland, Stony Brook, Indiana State, the next three. Oakland and Indiana State especially, like those aren't going to be the easiest of games. Oakland took Ohio State to the wire already this year. I think they were tied at half against Illinois. Indiana State's good, like they're just a good basketball team, and Michigan State already lost to James Madison at home this year. After that, they do get they have Penn State at home to kind of restart the Big Ten play at Northwestern, and then they're at Illinois. So probably by that third Big Ten game at Illinois, that's a big one. If they are going to be this team that competes in the Big Ten, competes in the tourney, I don't know if they have to win that, but they got to be pretty close. But aside from that, like they do have a chance to get back above 500 pretty quick in Big Ten play. Home against Penn State, at Northwestern, at Illinois, and then home against Rutgers, home against Minnesota, at Maryland. These are, games that are all pretty winnable for the most part. Illinois is obviously the game they're going to be an underdog in. They win even like 4 of those. Now they're 4-3 or 4-4 based on that. Can get back to at least 500 and kind of work their ways from there. So going to be a big game for them. Tyson Walker against Baylor hitting those big shots early also just set a tone. And then he was able to, there was a couple times he just told whatever defender he wanted. He said, hey, come here. And then he just went to cooking them. Cohen Carr, the dunks are elite. The dunks are just insane. But I posted on my Twitter, and I'll probably retweet it because I've thought about it at least like 25 times a day. He makes this weak side rotation against a lob, and like it's so okay. Baylor pick and roll, middle of the floor, big rolls. Cohen Carr's in the corner defending, and he just runs over, jumps up, and bats the ball out of the air before the lob, like who's rolling, before he even catches the lob. Like it was just an elite defensive play, and I love that's what he can kind of bring. He can be this secondary rim protector, even at 6'5", 6'6", because he can just jump so high so fast. He recovered super quickly, and it was an insane play to watch. Like I literally was just like, what was that as I watched? But a big win for Michigan State. The other thing with it is that they just seem to have some joy again. Like this was a team that was kind of down bad. Tom Izzo was saying they needed to be tougher and all that stuff. And, Tom Izzo is who he is as a coach anyways, and his personality. But this was just a game you saw everybody being excited for each other. You saw just the energy flowing through the team. And they need that. They need to have each other's backs. Obviously, I don't know what the locker room's like and all of that. Just speaking from a purely outside perspective, like it was good just to see them enjoy playing basketball, it seemed like again. Obviously, getting out to like a 30-point lead in the first half against one of the best offenses in the country will do that. Xavier Booker gets some minutes. He was, even without the blowout, he was going to get at least a few minutes. Knocked down 2 twos and a 3, 7 points in his 7 minutes of play. Curious to see what he kind of gets going forward. Is it going to be, is he going to start getting more minutes? I did think Sissoko and Cooper both played really well as being both lob threats on the roll, good rim protectors. I thought just much better in general. So maybe the Booker thing gets cooked down a little bit more, but I would expect sometime soon in Big Ten play, he's just going to have to get some more minutes, because if Michigan State keeps losing like they are, then something's got to change. So moving on to, we've kind of skimmed through all the games. Like I said, with it being finals week and all that, there aren't as many big games to talk about. Just want to talk about the Big Ten in general. And this is a league right now that's usually been very, very dominant in non-conference play. And so when they get, 9, 10 bids, what they had last year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they had 8 bids last year, and a couple right on the bubble that could have pushed it to 9 or even 10, is because they were just everybody was so good in non-conference play. And now that's where you get the people outside the Big Ten that are mad of like, hey, the Big Ten doesn't do well in the tournament. Why are they having so many teams? Well, they just take care of business in non-conference play, and that has not happened at all this year. Right now, to me, I assume that this is a 5 to 6 bid league. Jonah Freeman asked, how many teams do you see making the tournament as of right now? So my locks: Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio State. Ohio State is definitely the closest to being knocked out of that group because just of what their schedule has been. But those right now, I don't see any real scenario, unless it's like a doomsday scenario, that they don't make the tournament. And then there's probably 4 that I think have a chance. 3 of them probably more than others. The 4: Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern. I'm throwing Indiana in more of just like, I think that they have the talent to get there. Just at this point, I just don't they're the bottom of that because I just don't know if will have many quality wins to get them. That's why the Kansas game would have been huge. Obviously, they get blown out by Auburn, but Purdue, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio State locks. Michigan State, we saw what they can be, right? They just destroyed Baylor. And they pick up their first really big non-conference win. They've also lost to James Madison, who isn't, James Madison's a top 70 KenPom team, but losing at home to them is going to be big. The only thing they have going for them right now is their other 4 losses are Duke neutral, Arizona neutral, at home to Wisconsin. So those are all, 3 top 25-ish teams. I know Duke isn't like as great as usual this year. And then even at Nebraska isn't a bad loss with how Nebraska's played. Like Nebraska's, what are they? They're 9-2 right now. Their 2 losses coming to Creighton, and then that game that they absolutely blew against Minnesota. So Michigan State has the path to get there for sure. Nebraska is an interesting one. They have two decent to solid non-conference wins at this point. They obviously just picked up a win at Kansas State. Kansas State isn't as good this year, but that's still a good win. Duquesne is solid. Like it's a game that they needed to win, and they did at least. But they already have the win against Michigan State. Their thing is right now is they are 309th in their non-conference strength of schedule. So like, yes, they won a lot of their non-conference games, but at the same time, they just haven't played a ton of players. You look at their next two games are North Dakota and South Carolina State, both bottom 250 teams in KenPom. And so by the time they get to Big Ten play, their only top 100 teams non-conference games they've played is Duquesne, who's 81, they beat by 10. Home against Creighton, who's top 10 team, they got smoked, and then the one that they got today at Kansas State. They are going to probably have to get to 11 Big Ten-ish wins, 11-ish Big Ten wins, in my opinion, unless like they're able to knock off Purdue or something like that. But they have the talent to get there. Northwestern's the interesting case of like, hey, they have this insanely good win against Purdue. They also, like I said, have one of the worst losses possible against Chicago State at home. A good win against Dayton is becoming a little bit better kind of day by day. Their thing is kind of similar to Nebraska. They have 2 non-conference games against top 100, basically against top 200 opponents right now per KenPom. They beat Dayton, and then they lost to Mississippi State. They do play Arizona State this Wednesday, which we'll talk about in the week preview. That's a very big game for them right there. They have the talent to get to the tourney, but is that Chicago State loss going to loom large? And Indiana's more, like I said, just in there because I think that they can be the 5th or 6th best team in the Big Ten. And if they are that, are they going to just kind of get in by just default because the Big Ten has so many teams? Their only 3 losses are UConn, Auburn, Kansas. They also haven't beaten anybody like amazing. The best win at Michigan. They beat Maryland at home. So they took care of business in the non-conference. But I don't know. It's more of a, if people were like, there's no chance IU gets in, I'm cool with that. I think they have the talents to me because of what their defense can be to be a top 5-6 team. I don't know if they quite get there, but it's a tough look right now in the Big Ten. Craig Bauer says, Joe, let's be honest, MSU has been an embarrassment to the league, killed Baylor, but Baylor's record was built on a straw foundation. Yeah, I mean, MSU has not been good. Obviously, most people had them top 5, top 10 in the country. Even I would say people that were kind of doubting them kind of default put them up there, and they have not been anywhere close to that. Before we move on to the week preview, I'm just going to read through these. So we're taking out Purdue because Purdue's just in a tier, like Purdue's in a tier, and then it's like 2 tiers of like nothing, and then it's probably like the rest of the Big Ten. But taking out Purdue's non-conference wins, these are the best, non-conference wins the entire Big Ten has. Illinois over FAU, Wisconsin over Virginia, Wisconsin over Marquette. So 3 of them coming from, presumably the 2nd and 3rd best team in the Big Ten, or at least 2 of the top 4 teams for sure. Northwestern over Dayton, Ohio State over Bama, and Ohio State over UCLA. And then the next one after that is Nebraska over Kansas State. So you have 6 games right now that don't involve Purdue that are top 50 KenPom wins for the Big Ten. There's 6. That's it. This is a league that usually cleans up in non-conference, and that's what they've done the past few years. And now they have 6 wins that you'd say are good, probably 7th with the Nebraska win over Kansas State. And if I missed something, that's on me, my bad. But it just kind of goes to show, like, this is where teams are going to like have to get to 11 or 12 Big Ten wins. And if it's anything like last year, you're going to have a bunch of teams that are 8, 8 to 11 win teams. 8 to 10 wins in the Big Ten. I don't know if it gets it done unless you knock off like Purdue and at least one of Illinois or Wisconsin. It's just gonna be interesting what kind of happens comes tourney time, because there just aren't that many wins. And so now you're playing teams that don't have good wins, and your wins are looking a little bit less impressive day by day. So I think, I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of that rant off of like, hey, the Big Ten's in trouble. We'll kind of wrap it up here, go through the week preview. This is another week that there aren't like an insane number of games, but there are some solid ones. Start Monday, December 18th. What should be the game of the week? Probably, unless there's something I don't know about, probably in college basketball in general, though, and that is the Ohio State women's team taking on UCLA at home. That's 6:30 on FS1. Number 2 versus number 12 in the country, and just this should be an absolute fun game. Both teams are really, really talented. Ohio State plays with a ton of pace. They can score with anybody. UCLA has been pretty dominant this year, and so I'm really, really excited for what this game should be. On Tuesday, Michigan takes on Florida, 7 o'clock ESPN, I believe, in the Jumpman Classic. That is a neutral game. Michigan needs this badly. We just talked about, hey, the Big Ten has like 5 good non-conference wins. A win here for Michigan would probably put them in that category of at least having one. They started off super hot against some not great teams. They beat St. John's, which is solid enough. But aside from that, they've lost to a lot of pretty good teams so far. They kind of got to turn it around. A Florida win right here would be big for them. On Wednesday, that's probably the day with the most amount of action. You got the Illinois women's team taking on Arkansas at 11 a.m. on Flow Hoops. That is a tournament that they are in. Should be a fun matchup. Arkansas is solid. Illinois is looking to turn things around, like I said. Illinois is always just fun to watch, though, because they have such good guard play in Cook and Bryant that on any given game, either of them can really just go off, and they're a fun team to watch. On the women's side, Michigan takes on Florida, 6:30 on ESPN2. Another game that Michigan's looking solid. They've kind of been up and down. They lost a game, then the next game they won by 40, and it's just kind of back and forth. They're trying to figure out exactly who they are. On the final game on the women's side on Wednesday would be Nebraska at Kansas, 7:30 on ESPN Plus. Nebraska is going to be this kind of borderline tournament team. They're probably, I know it's early. If it started today, they're probably in. They look solid. They have some good pieces, and Kansas is also another team that's on the bubble. I think it's just going to be fun. And right now, per hoop stats, both teams are either in or like right on the bubble. On the men's side, Northwestern takes on Arizona State at 8:30 on ESPN2. It's like a semi-home game for Arizona State. It's in Phoenix. And this feels like a must-win for Northwestern. Arizona State hasn't been great. They're about 100th in KenPom right now. But especially after that Chicago State loss, you just can't afford a loss like this to go along with that. And so as tourney hopes kind of start looming, it just feels like a game that Northwestern has to absolutely win. Thursday, December 21st, there's just a ton of bye games from pretty much everybody, especially on the men's side. On the women's side, Iowa takes on Loyola Chicago on Big Ten Plus. Always fun watching Caitlin Clark and just watching her do what she does. Friday, December 22nd, there are 2 pretty important games on the men's side. Illinois takes on Missouri at 9 o'clock on FS1. Missouri hasn't been great. I believe they just had a pretty bad loss today too. I'm not going to be able to find that quick enough. But Illinois is the better team than Missouri. It is a home game. And they're just going to kind of have to take care of business and do what they do on that end. Another win that isn't a great win for the Big Ten non-conference game or schedule, but at the same time, a win is a win. Missouri just lost to Seton Hall. That's who they lost to. But the actual biggest game on the men's side on that day is Maryland at UCLA on ESPN2. I kind of already said UCLA isn't like a juggernaut this year. They're still a solid team. And if Maryland wants any chance of turning things around, it has to start with this UCLA game. 100%. Like they need this game badly. You pick up a good road victory, non-conference win. So the UCLA game is sandwiched between 2 bye games for them, and then they jump into Purdue. So if they're able to win their next 4, 2 bye games at UCLA and home against Purdue, they're at least looking somewhat like the team I thought that they could be coming into the year. They're another team that, hey, they just don't have a good non-conference win at this point. And so getting at least even at UCLA would be big if they have any chance of turning it around. I know I have a little more hope in them than compared to most, and that's just probably more preseason bias, and I'm willing to admit that it is what it is. And the last game of the week, Saturday, December 23rd, is the only game of the day, is Rutgers against Mississippi State. That is at 12 o'clock on Big Ten Network. This is another game that it's kind of the theme right now for the Big Ten of, hey, you just kind of need this because you need something in non-conference play. Their Rutgers' best win is at Seton Hall right now. Picking up a win against a good Mississippi State game heading into Christmas would be huge for them. Rutgers doesn't have a bad loss. Their worst loss is probably at Wake Forest or neutral against Princeton. Those are two of their three losses. The other one being Illinois. I don't know what to make of them. I don't trust the offense at all. The defense is good, but they also haven't played a ton of good teams yet. And the only good teams they have played, they've lost to. This will probably be a game that at least hopefully can find out a little bit more about them. That takes it there. Obviously, next day is Christmas Eve, and then there's going to be, I think, from the 24th to the 27th, there's no Big Ten games at all. 24th to 27th, no Big Ten games at all. 28th, the only game is Maryland against Coppin State. So pretty much 5 straight days of no Big Ten basketball. I don't know exactly what the schedule is going to be for this podcast. Maybe I'd assume next week it'll be sometime after Christmas, maybe that Tuesday or Wednesday, kind of doing a recap and a look ahead. And then after that, it'll be New Year's. We have to figure out exactly what day. And then from there, it'll be either every Sunday night or Monday night. For anybody, tuning in, I do appreciate it live. If you're watching this after, then, please hit the like button, subscribe. Like I said, be live, figure out exact schedule, but we'll get on the schedule. I'm happy to be doing this. I'm happy to be doing this live. I want to kind of get some guests on too at times, keep this a little bit more interactive, because I did the podcast for a couple of weeks and I was just like, man, I don't love monologuing to just completely myself for 40 minutes. At least here, I have the chat a little bit, interacting with me, but I appreciate everybody tuning in. Like, subscribe. I just put out a video, should be linked in the comments, me breaking down what Purdue did against Arizona, going through a couple of the key concepts and just kind of breaking down that film. You can follow me on Twitter at JoeJacksonCBB. A lot of film breakdown there and stuff. Also do coverage at Boilers and Stands on Twitter. We have our post-game show against Arizona, which is live on YouTube audio. And this will also be on audio on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. Once again, appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch you guys next week, maybe sometime. It'll be sometime soon. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you later.